This week, Barack Obama announced a new outreach program for disadvantaged youth, specifically racial minorities, men of color around the country. It's called My Brother's Keeper, and it's a partnership between both the government and also private individuals. Corporations are going to be raising money. They believe quite a bit of money, actually. More than $200 million over 5 years has apparently already been pledged. And Barack Obama gave some reasons for why he felt a partnership like this was necessary. He said, "By almost every measure, the group that is facing some of the most severe challenges in the 21st century in this country are boys and young men of color. 50 years after Dr. Martin Luther King talked about his dream for America's children, the stubborn fact is that the life chances for the average black or brown child in this country lags behind almost every measure and is worse for boys and young men. But while we just assume this is an inevitable part of American life, the obstacles that young men of color face should be treated as the outrage that it is." And so he thinks that this could significantly improve their life chances, I suppose. And he connected on a very personal level with some of the youths of color that he had met with while preparing to launch My Brother's Keeper. And in the video that we're about to watch, he explains sort of what his early life experience was like.
So, as Christian mentioned, during my visit, they're in a circle, and I sat down in the circle, and we went around, led by their counselor, and guys talked about their lives, talked about their stories. And when it was my turn, I explained to them that when I was their age, I was a lot like them. I didn't have a dad in the house. And I was angry about it, even though I didn't necessarily realize it at the time. I made bad choices. I got high without always thinking about the harm that it could do. I didn't always take school as seriously as I should have. I made excuses. After I was finished, the guy sitting next to me said, "Are you talking about you?" I said, "Yeah." And the point was, I could see myself in these young men. And the only difference is that I grew up in an environment that was a little bit more forgiving. So when I made a mistake, the consequences were not as severe. And I told these young men my story then, and I repeat it now because I firmly believe that every child deserves the same chances that I had.
So I love that he initiated this program. It is about time, and better late than never. I'll take it. I think it's great. To me, I've always thought that someone should lead an effort to go and communicate to, I think the wording we use now is silly, but youths of color. Yeah. Okay, anyway, black kids, Latino kids, etc., right?
I like the headline, real quick, to cut you off there, which you can't see. But Obama launches program to boost minority youth. Like, it's not quite like he's like he wants more of them. You know, let's get those minority youth numbers up. Yeah.
Like they're all trying to get over a fence.
Yeah, totally.
He's gonna boost them. Here, come on.
I think the key thing here is, look, we got to do two things. One is open up opportunity for young kids in places where they don't have opportunity. And number two is let them know that it's possible, right? Mm-hmm. And you would be shocked at how many people don't know that things are possible. So the study that I always think of when I think about that is that they took the kids who scored in the top 10% of the SATs, but from poor areas, not having to do with race, but just poor areas. And they went to substantially worse schools than kids that scored in the top 10%, but grew up in rich areas, okay? Because the kids in the rich areas knew that they could go to Harvard and the Ivy Leagues and Stanford and all that stuff. The kids in the poor areas had no idea. They'd go to East Tennessee State and they'd rock it there, they'd kill it there, right? And they're fine, etc., but they just had no sense of the possibilities that the world offers, right? So the fact that they now have a program that's trying to do that, I think, is great.
Yeah. No, I think he's going to face a lot of criticism, as we'll get to in some of the videos we're going to watch in just a little bit. And I think that he has warded off some of that criticism by making it not just simply another big government program, which I think would be perfectly fine, but a lot of people on the other side of the aisle would have a problem with. But the fact that it's the government working in conjunction with raising money from individuals and corporations, I think is a great thing. And I think that a lot of people generally would feel more comfortable with a program like this if it was targeted specifically at people who are disadvantaged based on income rather than along racial grounds or something like that. Like usually people have more support for that than like racial affirmative action or something like that. But I think the fact that he's raising money from individuals and from corporations, like targeting it in this way could very well raise much more money than a more broad-based non-racial ground sort of program could raise, I think.
I know Jimmy and I were struck by when he said that he made bad choices, and I was a little surprised because I was pretty sure he was going to say I made bad choices, like by striking a deal with the pharmaceutical companies to avoid providing Americans with affordable health care by insisting on a public option. I thought that was what he was going to say there, but it turned out he just meant.
I thought he was going to say by hiring Timothy Geithner.
Right,
That's what I thought he was going to say. That was my bad choice.
Okaying the drone strikes.
So yes,
all those would have been. Those were bad choices. Right? And I thought he was going to come clean about it.
And this is all because he grew up without a dad. He's still angry, he doesn't even know it, and he still keeps doing the stupid shit.
Right. Well, so that's a really important point, actually. So, because he's saying, obviously, he's referring to bad choices in smoking pot. But he wound up being president of the United States, so apparently it wasn't that bad a choice.
How bad of a choice?
Right.
Although he does say, that I didn't have to suffer any real consequences for that.
So, but that actually is the biggest irony there, and it's unfortunate because he's the person who, especially in his first term, was the one that enforced that severity, right? That when you got caught with drugs, they threw you down the river, right? And they would do the drug dispensary raids even more so than Bush did. Now, he's turned around substantially in the second term. So that's good, right? And he's trying to make sure that they don't have as severe consequences for the things he did and got away with and wound up becoming president for. But and by the way, he also didn't have a dad and still became president of the United States of America. So there's all this talk of like, if you're growing up in a single, parent household, oh my God, you got no chance. No, you do have a chance. But the key thing is you need opportunity. Yeah. And he mentioned that in the speech too, right? And he said, look, I had an educated mother, right? And I had grandparents who were really there for me, and I got a chance to go to a really good school, right? That's the difference. Yeah. Not whether you smoke pot, you had a dad, didn't have a dad. Yes. It's whether you're black, you're white. Do you get to go to a good school? Do you have a good support structure? If I was him, I would have focused even more on that.
Yeah. So there's one other quote from Barack Obama that actually plays into what you were just saying that I want to read. He says, "We will beat the odds. We need to give every child, no matter what they look like, where they live, a chance to reach their full potential. Because if we help these wonderful young men become better husbands and fathers and well-educated, hard-working, good citizens, then not only will they contribute to the growth and prosperity of their children, they will pass the lessons on to their children, on to their grandchildren. We'll start a different cycle, and this country will be richer and stronger for it for generations to come." So we're going to see some of the people who have a problem with this because they believe that the big problem is rap music or whatever. It's not that, there's no investment in the schools of the communities. They don't have the support structure they can rely on. I think that this makes all the sense in the world because this is exactly the sort of program where you will find a massive return long-term on the investment that we put in. For every dollar we put in, we know that the businesses they start are going to produce a lot of extra money. They're going to employ people. They're not going to be in jail. All of these things are going to be great benefits that we'll reap from this. And it's not like we've never tried it before. We did this with a different group, with white America after World War II by providing basically no interest rate loans to GIs coming back to start businesses and go to college and buy homes that would eventually accrue extra value so that they could send their kids to college. We've already been through this cycle before, but unfortunately along the way we left a lot of people behind. And if My Brother's Keeper goes a little bit of the way towards narrowing that gap, I think that it could be a great part of Barack Obama's legacy.
So one other issue that people had with this was that they said, well, you're emphasizing the personal responsibility thing too much. Toure had a commentary about that on MSNBC, and you're making it seem like it's their fault, right? When in reality, it's the structural racism that put them in this hole, and what you need to do is address that so they could have equality of opportunity. And I'm really torn on that, because I think that there's validity in that. He's right. The racism did put them in a hole. The lack of opportunity is the real problem, et cetera. But at the same time, I feel like, well, you got to also say, hey, you got to work hard and stuff. You think that's kind of assumed, right? But it's not necessarily assumed. I mean, you got to provide the right role models, right? And I think if a lot of African Americans that are successful go out there and give speeches, et cetera, and say, hey, here's what I did, and here's the opportunity I had, we want to try to get that for you so that you can do likewise. Overall, I think I get why, and we had a great professor, Jody Armour from USC, make that argument here in a TYT interviews thing that I loved, right? But overall, I like the speech, and I think it's got to include the personal responsibility part.
Yeah, I think it's good also. I think that what a shitty burden to have to carry if you're a successful black person in this country, that you're like somehow duty bound to go out and talk to other people of the same race to tell them that you can make it too. Like, we don't have to do that shit. You know, I don't have to go out and talk to other upper middle class Jews and tell them if they really bear down, they can probably make it, you know?
You don't want to because you don't want the competition.
Right, but I don't want to because I shit on TV, you know, and I mean, and the same stuff that the successful black people want to watch. And I mean, it's great that they do it, but I mean, it's just one more annoying burden that somehow we feel comfortable putting on them. And I don't even disagree, and I'm sure, I'm not sure, I imagine I'd feel that way, but you know, they got kids, they got stuff going on, you know? So, anyway.
Well, you know, this new thing is called My Brother's Keeper, and then Ron Paul came out with My Brother Better Keep His Hands to Himself and Die in the Street with No Health Insurance. So that's a different organization. It's a little different.
And
but
every once in a while,
useful, but slightly plagiarized. So,
So it's keeping in the Paul family. Yeah.
they go out and they give speeches. They're like, I just came out here to tell you all to fuck off. Good luck to you. But I did bring bootstraps. Hey, throw them the bootstraps.
But also remember,
Sell them the bootstraps. Don't give those away.
Yeah, that's right.
to Ray's point that you talked about is valid. They're both valid, but literally, this is an effort. The money is not about the personal responsibility. The money and the investment in this, which is, of course, again, a pittance compared to the tax breaks that we give oil companies and what we spend on foreign wars. But so it's good. But that's to correct some of the institutional barriers that are inevitable. The personal responsibility goes along with it. So I agree with Jack. I think it's
to put really fast, just to put it in perspective, the amount. It's great that they got the $200 million, but Paula Deen just raised between $75 and $100 million to restart her business. So we're not talking about a huge, unattainable amount of money.
Where'd you raise that money from?
I don't even know, but I read about it recently.
Tony Perkins, probably, the Research Council, David Duke's mailing list, whatever. There's probably a lot of stuff.
Ron Paul, perhaps.
Ron Paul maybe helped out. You know what they're going to say is, and what Rich Lowry always says, he's from the National Review, is that, you know, yes, there might still be some remnants of racism left over in America, but if you are willing to get educated and work hard, you can make it. So what that really says is, we really don't have any responsibility to you, because if you work hard, you can make it. And if you haven't made it, it's because you didn't work hard. Yeah. So that's what they're saying.
Which, and just this point may be obvious, but I mean, which just exists so nicely as a companion piece to what we've been hearing and what conservatives and some liberals have been saying for 100 years, which is that you're lazy to begin with.
Yes.
Like, you're lazy. You know, the color of your skin, the pigmentation of your skin somehow makes you lazy.
Well, what they say is the culture. They'll say the culture, but what they really mean is we don't like blacks and their black culture. Yeah, that's what that is.
It's weird that as property values in an area go up and there's a bigger tax base for the schools, less laziness. Weird how that works out.